Hello and welcome to the 18th chapter of the course. In this chapter, we'll be doing a high-stakes final table review with guest Graftekkel, Jans Arends. Hello, Jans.
Hello. Good to be here.
This is a 10K scoop PKO final table where Jans is one of the bigger medium stacks. The starting stack here would be 250K, and the starting bounty is 2.5K, so Urasov just has the starting bounty. Being in the final table, a starting bounty would be worth around 40-ish% of a starting stack, so around 100K for a starting bounty. Sounds correct, yes?
Yep, sounds good to me.
Okay, perfect. So the way we'll be doing this is we will be going through all of the hands in the beginning, and then after some point when action gets a bit stale because stacks are super deep, we'll only jump to the most interesting hands. Right, so let's get started.
Yeah, let's do it. Should be an interesting one.
We have some very polite people wishing each other good luck in the chat. The fakest good lucks I've ever seen. Okay, so first hand, power breeze opens, and pocket threes folding I think makes sense when the bounty is only the starting one.
Yeah, I think you definitely want a VPIP here once the bounty is a little bit bigger, and I mean it could still be a VPIP given his stack. He also covers the big blind, so I think that's also a factor. Yeah, I wouldn't mind a VPIP actually. I would imagine you could probably get away with it, but yeah, it's low EV.
10-8 seems like a pretty standard event with this stack size.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, small sizing. So, but this should be just a range, but board for sure.
Yeah.
And call, and then second barrel seems very standard so far. And then river just check. Yeah, very standard first hand. Perfect. This is just a visual bug, by the way. He didn't go all in or anything. It goes away in a little bit.
Oh, right. Yeah, they used to have that for a while
Yeah.
in the replayer.
Okay, next hand. Looks like we are involved.
Yeah, not folding this one.
Yep, no. King Queen suited open, and small blind here should mostly just be calling, right?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting spot actually for him. I mean, he obviously covers, but then so you have some incentive to get more money in. But on the other hand, like if stacks go in, you're not in very good shape here. I think with 10. So I think you probably just call, yeah, to avoid the spot where you just get jammed on and kind of are in a really tough spot with 10s, I think.
Yeah, and I also think your opening range will be reasonably tight here when you are covered by two people and you have a fairly big bounty yourself.
Yeah, and also the big blind as a starting bounty is basically irrelevant. So no reason to really open that wide into him.
This looks like a pretty clear call, I think, in position. In a non-PSKO tournament, I think we don't really want to have that many flats, but this one probably still makes it into calling range.
Yeah, I think 50 bigs deep, you definitely have some calls here, and this probably falls into the calling category. Although, like in these kind of spots, I think if it's a little bit shallower, like jamming this kind of hand makes a lot of sense because it's a spot where like ace queen suited and ace queen off probably don't induce, and then you get to fold out all his ace x bluffs. So, but at 50 bigs, I think it makes a little bit more sense to be calling. Yeah.
I would see a 10% c bet. Do you think this is a range bet flop for him?
That's a good question. I think it's actually not. Yeah, it's. I think it's a reasonable strategy, and I think the very small sizes on these mono boards are definitely used, like 10-15% pot. And I think in reality it's probably even a little bit more effective than it should be. Like it's pretty hard not to overfold to 10% pot. So I don't mind it actually. Although if you start checking hands, and obviously this kind of hand makes sense to check sometimes, but yeah, I don't mind it.
Yep, I agree with you as well. So I guess now it's just gonna check down. I don't see any reason for him to keep on betting, and we can really value bet.
Yeah, I think we both just have the kind of hand that always goes to showdown.
Yep. The visual bug's still here, by the way. No one get confused by this. So ace queen, pretty standard open, and then I guess it just folds too. Yep. No one wants to be VP. Okay, this is the first interesting hand that we have that I have a C4 as well. Ace queen, pretty standard open.
What's that?
King jack being covered, I think just a fold. If he was covering, probably a VP, but now just folding.
Yeah, I think knowing Nacho, if he covered me, he would probably not be folding. But I think he is very standard fold. Yeah.
And king 8 suited looks like a pretty standard defend.
Yeah, for sure.
So far, so good. Now, we get the 8-6 deuce board. And what are your thoughts here? Do you get to range bet, or how do you perceive this board?
Yeah, so like most of the sims, the ICM sims and ICM post-flop sims that I run are obviously for non-PKO, so it's a little bit different here, I imagine, because the risk premiums are slower, so like the advantage that you have as covering stack is a little bit diminished. But I think from most ICM sims that I've seen, you just still get to bet very high frequency here as the imposition stack, like whereas in chip EV you want to like big bet and check mostly. So I think it definitely makes sense to bet a higher frequency here, and like a hand like Ace Queen I think gets to bet a little bit more often because of that in this scenario. And I think obviously with Ace Queen, you probably mostly want to, or you're most interested in sizing small, like keeping more Ace X in. You're mostly betting for protection, clear out some equity. So I think it's reasonable. I think also reasonable to have some jacks here, and obviously I still would play also bigger sizing, so it does complicate my strat a little bit. To split sizes, but I think it's fine. It's not that hard to pick your combos for the different sizes, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think this hand doesn't really care if it bets or checks. Bet sometimes, check sometimes. Makes sense. Papyrus goes for a check raise with king 8. To me, this looks a little bit on the thinner side. I think it's fine, especially if he thinks you are range betting here. But he still
Yeah,
has 35 big blinds on a final table with a bunch of similar stacks, so it's not like he has no ICM pressure on him.
yeah, and yeah, it could be that he reads into my sizing as just being pretty much always weak, which I mean, I would hope that it's not. I hope I built my strategy well enough where this also includes some strong hands and definitely enough hands that can continue. But maybe he just reads into that and decides his hand is like kind of more nutted than it maybe should be, so he wants to put more money in, something like that. And I guess my spot is also somewhat interesting, but I think versus this small of a sizing, I probably cannot by default. Like obviously, I prefer to have any kind of backdoor draw, but Ace Queen still it has to be still somewhat close because your hand has basically no potential. But yeah, I decided to call.
Yep. I think call is fine, especially, again, this is also a dynamic where if he thinks your sizing is weak and he's check raising a bit too much, then we need to defend fairly wide against that as well.
Yeah, yeah,
On the turn, he goes for a check. I think this is pretty standard. He should be checking pretty much everything here.
yeah. This card is just smashes my continuing range for flop, I think.
Yep. And on the turn, you go for a half pot bet. Yeah, looks good. He calls, looks pretty standard. And then on the river, you jump. Seems, again, very, very natural. Super strong hand. He shouldn't have any 6x really, but check raises flop.
Yeah, for sure. I think he has basically zero, and I think my turn sizing could potentially be a little bit bigger. Like it's like a half pot now, and like this is like what is it, like almost 3/4 pot on the river, I guess. Um, yeah, maybe a little bit closer to geometrical would be better. So like 2/3, 2/3, something like that.
Yeah, I agree. And now on the river, his decision is pretty close. King 8, especially with spades blocking the backdoor flush stuff, I'm not sure is the correct hand to be calling here. The king looks like a pretty bad kicker, I think.
Yeah, I definitely will block a lot of my floats that will bluff sometimes on the river. And yeah, I think Ace 8 is already a lot better. I mean, I think that's the kind of a hand that you're calling, and then there's a big drop off to King 8 that is significantly worse for calling, I think. Yeah, I'm not sure. It's a tough spot. I think you probably should end up folding, but I can also not really blame him for calling.
Yeah, he ended up calling in game and seeing the bad news. And let's have a look at the sim. All right, so first for our strategy, we are supposed to be betting very close to range, and as you said, splitting between a small and the pot sizing. The half pot sizing isn't really used, just want to go either very small or very large. And as you again correctly identified, Ace Queen just doesn't really care, just wants to bet small when it bets and mix between betting small and checking. His King 8 is raising sometimes, so why not? Of course, Ace 8, much more of a pure check raise candidate.
Yeah.
Against the check raise, which is slightly larger in the sim, it's 140. He went like 130 in game.
Yeah, I think this sizing would be a little bit better. Um, yeah.
Ace queen is again kind of indifferent. Uh, chooses some suits over others. I guess you want to be blocking queen eight suited or something. I'm not too sure how the suit selection is done, but yeah, it doesn't
It
matter
looks
if
like you don't want to have a club mostly, but yeah, I think given the sizing was quite a bit smaller, I think it's probably fine to mostly continue.
yeah, for sure. Turn was the queen, and yeah, just a pure range check for him. As we said, queen just crosses your range.
Right.
As for sizings, yeah, you want to go more towards the like 70% kind of sizing, not so much
Yeah,
half
I thought
pot.
so. Yeah, it's like it's a spot where you don't really like you basically bet Queen X and better, I think. So you're not really betting for protection or yeah, I guess Ace Eight is betting, of course, but yeah, so I think it makes sense to not go too small. Yeah, so now I jammed for less than half pot on the river, right?
It's
So he gets a
exactly.
significantly worse price in game. And if we look at my bluffs,
Yeah. So your bluff's gonna be some ace highs, but basically a lot of hands with the king, like ace king
no,
will
no, yeah,
bluffing.
King seven, King five, it looks like.
Yeah, king
And
seven, king five.
yeah, also some ace X like ace five, ace four. Um, yeah, I guess it's mostly because yeah, you bet these like super non-equity hands on turn, and those are the follow throughs in the river.
Yep. And if we look at the half pot sizing, which is a low frequency, but still just to check out how his strategy looks like. So after we jam, then king eight, yeah, it's just folding a lot.
Actually, the spades seem to be kind
His
of good.
specific suit, yeah, actually ends up wanting to call. But yeah, so overall, I guess we reached the same conclusion when we spoke about the hand that all decisions are going to be very, very close.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
we can see better check the flop, we can call or fold against the check raise, and on the river, you can call or fold, and both options are flying.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Perfect. Good that we ran the hand.
Nice to knock out Papritz though. He's a dangerous guy.
Okay. Okay, next hand. Seems like it folds to ace nine. Pretty standard open. And then ace three suited, who is the big covering stack from the small blind, decides to go for a jam. What do you think about that? What do you think about jamming?
Yeah, so it looks kind of natural, but I think on not PKO final tables, this is probably just not a thing. Like these kind of sims end up being super counterintuitive in my opinion because there's usually like almost no jams, and I think it probably has to do with the fact that first of all, like obviously kind of opens tight, but then also just gets to call pretty wide. Whereas on like normal non-PKO final tables, he has to fold a lot, right? And that's what you capitalize on with your jams here. And if you can just call very wide, I think the jams kind of don't make much sense anymore. But it's certainly counterintuitive, and I'm not even sure if in this spot it might be slightly different. Like yeah, obviously there's a lot of chips, so you can gamble a little bit. Oh yeah, and obviously the small bounty actually would make it very clearly not a spot where you want to
Yeah,
jam a lot. Actually,
yeah, you nailed it. So it's not a spot where you want to have many jams from the small blind. For the reason I said, basically, his opening range will be fairly strong and tight, and also he can call off wider because of lower PKO risk premium. The bounty element is just not really there either. Like his bounty is worth pretty much nothing.
uh-huh.
Like two big blinds, baby. So yeah, I think you should go for a more three bet call strategy, but let's have a look. Maybe we are wrong.
And then I guess ace four suited would become just a call.
So opening range, 31%, not too tight, but still like reasonably tight for a cutoff. And the small blind, yeah, so no jams at all. And these low suited aces just want to be calling. So our three bet range is just going to be super, super polar here.
Yeah, queen deuce suited. It's it's very interesting the difference between PKO final tables and normal final tables where the three bet strategies as big or as a big stack versus medium stacks it's completely different. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we want to go super polar here and just have like offsuit ace-x and king nine off, queen nine off as three bets. So basically, I would say that we use as three bets the hands that we like the top of our folding range, the hands that we can't profitably call anymore.
Yeah, that looks like what's going on, and also interesting. Like I had like ace jack off. I assume it's just three bet calling here, which is also pretty interesting. Like it seems wide, but
Mhm. Against the 3-bet, the cutoff is jamming something like this. So most pocket pairs, and then ace jack off, king queen suited, even king queen off is jamming, which is fairly
yeah,
interesting.
this is the spot where the king queen jam, like I mentioned earlier, is super good because you like there's so many offsuit ace x bluffs, so they all get to fold when you jam. So it's a really good kind of combo to be forward jamming. You block a lot of value, still have decent equity, fold out a lot of bluffs. Yeah, all the offsuit ace x, a lot of combos that you can fold out.
And yeah, as you said, ace jack off, king queen off are just 3-bet calling.
Yeah, it's the king queen off even. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, but it is a spot where we need to be somewhat careful as the chip leader, because in order to 3-bet call these hands, we need our opponent to be jamming like pocket fives and king 10 suited and all these kind of hands.
Yeah, although I think yeah, you definitely this kind of spot people will recognize that they get three bet light a lot. So I wouldn't be shocked to see these from high six rack to see these forward jams at all.
Yeah. Also, last thing worth pointing out here is how wide the small blind gets to call. Calling like 5-3 suited, 9-6 suited, a lot of these hands. And the main reason for that would be that his equity realization post-flop is going to be super high. The big blind won't be squeezing much, as the short is stack covered by both with a reasonable bounty. And yeah, cutoff has to play somewhat tight post-flop being covered.
Yeah,
So ace line, of course, folds against the jam. Jack 10 off from the cutoff, yeah, I think looks like a fine fold here, being covered by everyone.
yeah. It's probably close, but I don't mind folding.
6-7, standard defend. And in position, checks back. I think it's reasonable to have some checkbacks with the lower risk premium here. What do you think?
Yeah, sure, but I think ace nine still just bets. And like maybe had like ace seven, for example, checks. I think ace nine is just you still get called a lot by the lower ace x. There's not that much better ace x in big blind's range anyway. So yeah, I think you just bet this for value, to be honest.
The 10 checkback, I think, is a bit too tight. Like, this looks like a hand you definitely want to go for two streets now.
Yeah, this definitely looks a little bit too tight.
Yeah, I imagine you get to check a bunch with the non-kicker ace x.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yep, and then on the river, 6-7 doesn't bluff.
Yeah, I mean, like sixes and sevens, I guess, should be hands that get to the river kind of higher frequency for imposition. So maybe blocker wise, it's not ideal. Like you want to have maybe you had like let's say 10-3 suited or something is a lot better bluff. But still, yeah, you could still assume that it's probably overfolded a little bit the river by imposition. So I wouldn't mind bluffing with.
Yep. Ace line bivets, and of course takes down. Next hand doesn't look like we have anything interesting going on. Just a walk. Lucky you.
Easy chips.
Next up, we have ace jack against an under the gun open. This looks like a call, right?
Yeah, I think you mostly want to call here, yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. So we see a call. And then what's your thoughts with 6-4 suited on the small blind?
Um, yeah, it's actually my favorite hand. No, it's like I cover everyone. At this point, I'm only covered by Coco Jumbo, who's not in the pot, of course. So I think this is a spot where, in terms of suited hands, you especially like suited hands with some nut potential, so like suited connectors, this kind of stuff. You just get to VP it pretty wide, I assume. Yeah, and I think I also think that the big blind is probably not going to squeeze too much, so like your extra realization will be pretty good. Going to see flop pretty often, and I think also the imposition players are recreational. So all these factors I think make it for a decent VP hand, even though it looks a little bit loose. But yeah, I think it's fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. This is a spot where we just get to overcall very, very wide. All the suited connected stuff performs super well. So 6-4 suited, yes, let's see a flop. Looks like a pretty good flop for us, but we do end up facing a large stub sizing here.
Oh, yeah, okay.
If
That's
I recall correctly. Let me see. Yeah. Yeah, he goes for like
Oh,
a
that's
two-third
very
spot.
interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This is it's obviously an extremely weird spot now because I mean I just don't think you should ever be betting large here, and I mean I assume when I saw this in game I attributed quite a bit of strength to this, even though he had a complete airball, but I think I ended up folding here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the field is very good when we are the first to act.
Yeah, it's just so tough. Like, first of all, obviously there's still a lot of dominating flush draws in all ranges, and then you have two people to act behind. I think under the gun is gonna check very high frequency, so he's gonna end up having a lot of strong hands, and then yeah, your equity realization is just very very bad when you have two to act, and then obviously you face super strong range. There's not really that many good things that can happen. So I think fold makes sense actually.
Yeah, yep, I think it's a very good fold. A6 offsuit folding seems a bit tight, I think. Looks like a hand we just want to open,
Yeah, I
I
think if you
imagine.
cover everyone, although yeah, I think probably still open. Yeah, yeah,
Yep. 10-7 suited also seems a bit tight to me.
yeah. Especially this, like my stack is so close to his that he definitely shouldn't be too worried about me. So I think he should definitely open that. Yeah.
Yep. Our open, of course, super standard. 8-5 suited defend, super standard. And on the flop, I think here we just get to range bet for small sizing.
Yeah, I think the five and the deuce are low enough where it's just a range bet board.
Turn pairs the 5, and he goes for a, let's see, lead, if I remember correctly. Yeah, for a very small sizing lead. We just have to continue with ace-jack high here. Just not much of a decision, really.
Yeah, versus 25% leads, you just have to call. Probably a lot of king highs have to call as well. So obviously not really a decision on the turn.
Yep. And on the Reaper, he goes for a fairly large sizing. Yeah, he goes for pot sizing, and of course, you have a pretty clear fold here. Yep, standing hand, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really block many bluffs, but on the other hand, I obviously have a lot of better bluff catches. So I think fairly straightforward fold.
Yep. Pugadates, very standard under the gun open, folds to the big blind, who goes for a jam. So even though it's a PSKO final table, I don't necessarily like this jam against the tight under the gun range.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of the same concept a little bit, and even on non-PKO final tables, this concept also exists. Like, but when opening ranges are very very tight, you don't really have that many jams, and you just like your value just goes for three bet call, and you three bet not only with some bluffs, but jamming doesn't really make sense if he opens, let's say less than 13-14% or something, which is probably true, and he might even be a little bit tighter than that. So I think, yeah, like in this case, for example, you don't really get called by worse hands. I think, like if you're very optimistic, you could say that nines calls it off maybe, but yeah, you just filter his range to better hands that crush you, that call, and all the worse hands just get to fold. So I think whenever that happens, it's just generally not really a good strat to be jamming a hand.
Yeah, exactly. I have the same thoughts with you. And the bounty aspect isn't even that important here. He has 1.5 starting bounties. So, like, how much is that? Like 120k at the pot, 130k, something like that. So it's
Yeah,
just not gonna be much, like 3 big blinds, 4 or so.
yeah, that won't affect your decision too much, I think.
Yep. Jacks open, sure. Quinten suited seems like a pure cold hand.
Yeah.
Quinten suited on the small blind, I think, is fairly interesting.
Um.
Now, my thoughts
Yeah.
are that it's a hand that should probably end up calling, given how wide the two other ranges are. Coco Jumbo should be opening super, super wide, being the biggest stack, and then Lex being the second biggest stack in position from the cutoff should be calling super wide as well. So I think with the lower PKO risk premium, Quinten suited does get to overcall.
Yeah, and then you still have Big Blood behind who you the only player that you cover basically. So yeah, I don't mind it.
Yep. 7 deuce 5, and we have a c-bet from Jack. Yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah, I mean, no one really knows what's going on in four-way pots, I think, but I think if you're by far the covering stack, it makes sense that you get to have some bets, and I mean this seems like a decent enough combo to be betting.
Mm-hmm. Queen 10 calls, yeah, sure. And 6-4 overcalling seems very, very reasonable.
Yeah, I remember this hand actually now. It's yeah, this is pretty wild, pretty wild.
Yeah, so the 8 of clubs rolls off, and small blind goes for a lead. And I think that makes some sense because the small blind will be by far the position that has the most flush draws here.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because pretty much, I don't know, the biggest portion of his range anyway will be flush draws on the flop. He doesn't have much 7x, he doesn't have much 5x, and he has a lot of like suited broadways in these kind of hands, suited ace-x.
I think by far small. Like it really makes sense to lead here because by far the strongest range is from small blind here. Like big blind still has some some pairs like some 7x whatever, and small blind just really doesn't have much 7x at all. It's like a flush, or yeah, there's a bunch of sets probably still in this range as well. So I think actually this might just be a range lead for small blind.
Yep, I think it's a really good lead. And here's something really surprising happens. I think the big blind just ends up folding the straight.
Yeah, that is. I mean, I, so yeah, I actually I think I remember that he was bragging after the hand about what a good fold he made. I think you're just not drawing that often enough here to be folding. Like you just face a set or something else often enough that you don't really fold here. Even though obviously you have a hand that cannot improve against the hand that Eurosov has right now, but yeah, I think there's just too many sets to be folding here. I just don't really see how you can fold for this price. But yeah, good for
Another
him.
thing is that you said the hand cannot improve. Yes, it cannot. But what hands do you have that can improve? Like you don't have a7 offsuit preflop. You don't have king 7 offsuit.
No, I mean like two pairs could still improve to about, but I think yeah, there's absolutely no discussion that you just have to call it for versus water pot or whatever it is. Yeah, I don't really. It's like a soul read fold, I guess, but it's gonna look fairly stupid when Eurosov just has eights here.
Yeah, but they're genius now. So
Yeah, and Coco Jumbo calls, I guess. I mean, I'm really, really not excited here on the turn. But I guess for this price you have to call.
yeah, I guess you're sort of getting the direct odds to call against the range.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You still have some set outs versus the lower sets, and then also flush outs. And I mean, it doesn't happen that you're completely drawing that like now very often, I guess.
Quinten suited on the river goes for a very small sizing. And here I think you
Yeah.
just have to find it in you and fold.
Sorry, say again.
I think you have to find it in your soul and just make the fold. You have to find the strength to fold jacks here, even though it's a very small sizing.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. I mean, it's easy when you can see the cards, but it seems like somewhat of an easy fold because it's just a spot where it's so incredibly tough to open the bluff, and then obviously you get an insane price. But I think there's just spots where bluffs are just kind of non-existent, so you just kind of have to discipline. But yeah, if you're sitting on 100 big blinds and you face 20 or like 19% pot bets, it's obviously not very easy.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So ace-8, yeah, very standard open for us. And what's going to happen, I guess, okay, buttons go to sixes. And on the flop, seems like a range check, given how wide we'll be opening.
Yeah, I think so, or close enough anyway. And it's certainly a hand that always checks, I think.
Yep. Flop check on the turn. I still think our hand can really bet. Doesn't have anything going for it. No equity, no blockers, no nothing. And on the river, it's just kind of too strong to bet. So yeah, I think just check down and hope we somehow win against something.
Yeah, like you're kind of hoping for a chop there, I guess, or maybe like there's very rare king X that checks down, although it's I don't know. But yeah, like you cannot really bluff everything, and you can show down for some percentage of the pot. I think you just do this with ace-8.
10-8 suited, I think looks like a fine open, but it's uncharacteristic of him because he folded 10-7 suited from the cutoff.
Yeah, it's but yeah, like I said, I think this guy's recreational. So yeah, like recreationals do this kind of stuff, I guess.
Yep. And Queen Jack off, sure, I don't mind the call from the small blind.
Yeah, especially if you think he's like somewhat of a weaker player, then I think it makes sense to cover. Yeah, why not?
Flop goes check check. Sure. Turn we see a fairly large bet. Seems pretty standard. 10-8 just calling. And on the river he goes for another pot size bet. I think this is pretty good. When you see perhaps a recreational checking back this flop, I think you can expect he will almost never have a better hand than Queen Jack.
Yeah.
And so many misdraws, so yeah, I think it makes sense to go for larger sizings.
Yeah, I definitely think that line is pretty good. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. King Queen, pretty standard open again, and he folds Ace 8 from the big blind. I think this is a hand what you just call when we are so deep and it's a min raise.
Yeah, especially in these kind of spots where you just don't really three bet wide for value at all. You just get to call like down to pretty weak hands. Yeah. Anyway, so I think the ace eight fold is way too tight. Yeah.
Mm, yep, I agree. Ace Jack seems like a pretty standard open, and we defend. Hopefully the small blind folds. He does.
He's thinking about it.
Close one. Well, yeah, of course, we don't free bet a hand as strong as this, and I think this bot just checks down. Oh no, he c bets actually. I thought it checked out, I remember wrong.
Guess it's fold. Yeah, I think it's probably just a fold without a spade. It's his c bet is interesting though. Seems like a hand that would want to check a lot, but
Yeah, I think
yeah,
mixing some bets could be fine though.
yeah.
Like I can picture the sim in my head, and this is like the 30% frequency c bet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And yeah, he will probably be well aware of how to play that spot, and I think he will find the mixes probably.
Mm-hmm. So this hand falls to us, limping king 7. Yep, I think when we're so deep, we just want to be limping a lot. Yeah, we cover,
Yeah,
but I don't think it matters too much.
yeah, I would play a pretty limp heavy strategy there, I think.
Flop, check, check, turn. Yep, check, check, and river, we go for a bet. Yeah, seems very standard, and he folds. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, next up, Ace Deuce, I imagine, will be opening, and just gets a walk. Yep. 9-8 suited, goes for an open this time. And again, I think this is the kind of spot where it's hard for people to tell that 10-7 suited is a kind of better hand from the cutoff than this is from the hijack.
Yeah.
Our hand, I think, just wants to be calling here. Seems a bit too strong to be 3-betting.
Yeah, it's just not really a good three betting hand. I think just like lets worse hands fold, gets called a bit better kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. On the flop, what is your strategy?
Yeah. So I think this hand should probably make something. Yeah, I would still check a lot here. I think just in general with my range, and then yeah, I won't really like bet thin for value or like bet for protection a lot. I do think like multi-way though a smaller sizing is fine. Like whereas heads up you probably size up a little bit with multi-way. I think the 1/3 or a little bit smaller makes sense. And yeah, this hand can go both ways. I think there's arguments for betting and checking. I think the worst hand that I bet for value here is probably like King Jack, King Queen type of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep, makes sense. Just mixing on the flop. And on the turn, I imagine we just want to do a bunch of mixing as well. We want to bet some with flush draws, check some with flush draws.
Yeah, it's an interesting spot. Like it's deep enough where betting not at draws is pretty attractive, and then obviously I think on a three you don't really, even though I think Eurosov is good enough certainly where he won't have a check raise range on the flop. But then on a three you won't really face many raises or jams. So I do think then betting with not a draws becomes pretty attractive. On the other hand, like yeah, I think also you do have some showdown value. There's also an argument to be made for keeping some worse draws in. Like obviously, if he has a low flush draw, it just falls to turn bet. So I think both arguments are you can make. I think mixing something is good.
Yep. And other river, we get there. Yay. So here,
Yeah,
I think just going all in for basically a pot size bet makes a lot of sense.
yeah, certainly. And I think yeah, bluffs would mainly come from like obviously you really want to have spade here if you bluff, and I think in terms of offsuit hands, it's got to be like ace jack off, ace queen off mostly. Queen jack off, I probably won't have in my range here. So yeah, these hands obviously start betting quite a bit on the flop, and then again they make something on turn, and then I think once you get to the river, they become pure jams, I think.
Potentially some low pocket pairs as well, like some fours, fives with
Sure, yeah,
spade.
yeah. Yeah.
So what about his decision? Because I think this is the most interesting part of the hand.
Yeah, so obviously King of Spades is very, very good to have. Because a hand like King Queen of Spades is certainly in my range. The Queen though is obviously very bad. Because yeah, Ace Queen with Ace Spades, for example, is a hand that would go for this line as bluff quite frequently. So I don't know. It's kind of in different spot, I guess.
Yeah, because the problem is that he doesn't really call like, king 8 on the turn, but just a fold.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, the queen blocks bluffs, but at the same time, he doesn't really have much else. I don't think just calling king X of spades is enough here.
No, but maybe like I assume he has a hand, for example, like King Deuce suited or something. These type of hands probably call, but I don't know. It's a very, very tough spot. I'm not really, I don't really have strong opinion. I think
Yep,
calling and folding is
I
both
agree.
fine.
One thing that I would consider here is because it's a very top-heavy PSKO final table, and because we have basically no bounties at all, I might be a bit more tempted to go for the call here and try to cover everyone on the table to potentially go for some bounties.
Yeah, there's certainly some future EV argument to be made for calling a little bit wider in a spot that you assume is like, like break-even calling spot. Then the future EV might make it more of a call because, yeah, like you said, covering everyone, having a huge stack is, and certainly in a smaller field PKO where like a lot of the money from the prize pool will be up top, whereas in big fields a lot of money leaves the prize pool earlier. I think yeah, it's so much more top heavy that it makes some sense to go for these kind of yeah, like big stack plays.
Yep, but then I am known to be a bit of a caller, so
True.
okay, so Jack 10 suited, yes, standard open, King Queen suited, standard call, Ace 3 suited, seems like a hand that wants to overcall a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
And it does, very good. Lex goes for a c-bet here, and I don't think I like it. Yes, you are the covering stack, but at the same time, the battle is pretty close, and yeah, I just don't really think you get to c-bet ace low that much.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of this. I think if you have hearts, for example, it's already a little bit better because like there's less dominating draws that you get countered by. But yeah, I think you just mostly check like you want to have either a hand that unblocks faults a little bit better or just has better potential, I guess.
Ace 3 suited goes for the overcall, and I think I'll just raise here. I don't think you get to have too many overcalls, and two pair vulnerable seems like a raising hand.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, this hand, if I remember correctly, it goes. Oh well, I won't spoil it, but I think this is a little bit misplayed. Yeah, all around.
Jack 10, of course, if it c-bets now, it keeps on barreling, picks up the equity, so
Yeah, and I think in this spot you get a lot of naked ace x to fold certainly from both players because yeah, at this point your line looks like pretty strong. Let's say ace queen, ace king plus something like this. So yeah, I think it's yeah. When you get this turn, you just bet.
yeah, and ace 3 suited on the turn, so instinct says jam, but on the other hand, you're just never gonna have bluffs here.
Yeah, I think I would still be calling. Like there's certainly a good amount of hands that I think Lex also, given that he probably oversee bets a little bit, he might even have ace eight here. And so there's quite a lot of combos that beat you, and then yeah, I don't know how often he actually has a flush draw on the turn. So like folding out equity, I'm not sure if that's a
Yeah.
good argument to make. Yeah, if he bets polar enough, then obviously polling makes more sense. Just let him bluff the river sometimes.
So on the river, of course, Lex goes for a jam, and what do you think about ace 3 here?
Yeah, so first of all, like what I said earlier about like the hearts versus diamonds, like here, for example, on the river, like even though you obviously jam because you have a flush, like you just kind of he's gonna have like ace-x of diamonds fairly often here. That's just a pretty big part of his range, I think. So that's why the flop bet is already a lot less attractive. And then ace-3, I think this is just a fold. I mean,
Yeah, I
I
agree.
just really just don't see enough bluffs here. You're also like fairly low in your range, given that you just get to with a nut flush or a better two pair to the river pretty often, I guess. So yeah, it just seems like a fairly straightforward fold to me, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Like absolute hand strength here isn't that important because he's not value betting like ace king or something like that. So it doesn't matter that you have two pair.
Yeah, exactly. I think maybe it could be a thing that where like he just made a big fold the hand before, and now he's just kind of like these kind of things do come into play a little bit, I think. Even for like long time high stakes racks, I've been guilty of this myself plenty of
Yeah,
times. So,
for sure, me too.
but yeah, I think it's certainly should be a fold in the river.
Mm-hmm. This is the second hand I have a sim for. It falls to the small blind, seems very standard, and he goes for a jam. I think hand selection looks good. So how wide would you say Chris can call, Watanos can call here?
So let's see. He is the second shortest stack. He's won 15 big blind stack. Yeah, that's you're putting me on the spot here. Let's think. Yes. I mean, I certainly would never fold fives. I, yeah, I'm just kind of always referencing how wide I would call in a non-PKO final table, and then I think fives is a fold, and so but it's like the bottom or the top of your folding range, I guess. So then I would certainly call in PKO. Um, yeah, do you want to give me? Do you want me to give a specific range or?
No, of course not, of course not. Just your thought process. I think that was very good. But it's the same process I follow as well. I always think, okay, how wide would I call in a not PSKO here? And then I just try to think how much lower the risk premium is and how many hands I can add to my range.
Yeah, exactly. So like in non-PKO, like your risk premium would be something like 15%, I guess. Maybe a little bit higher, although the shortest stack is not that short. And that here it has to be like 5-ish or something.
Yeah, so big blind against small blind, yeah, very close. It's like 7.6, so very close. Small blind doesn't get to jam too much. Jumps a lot of the middling suited connected stuff, and then some offsuit a6. One thing to point out here is that he doesn't get to jam like any two. For example, like Jack deuce off isn't a jam. It doesn't make money. Same goes with some other terrible hands.
Yeah, exactly. When in position just calls pretty wide, and you just don't really, it doesn't really make sense to jam any two. Yeah, okay, so fives is bottom actually. Okay.
Yeah, fives is bottom, fours break even. But we do get to call very wide, so we call hands like queen nine suited, king nine suited, ace five off. And the reason we go so wide on the like suited high cards is that we just do very well against the jamming range.
Yeah.
As we saw, the jamming range just has offsuit ace and like middling suited stuff. So a hand like king nine suited just does so well against this range because it dominates a lot, or is flipping against like ace seven off.
Yeah. I certainly wouldn't have found the ace five off, ace six off calls, I think, or even king ten off these type of hands. Queen and suited, yeah, it's wild. But yeah, it makes sense. Like the range, you face a very specific wide range that is completely capped, so to speak, and yeah, it makes sense to call off wide against that.
Yeah, I would think that in game the range will probably be a little bit differently constructed. I think there will be more like king queen off, king jack off, king ten off hands that jam.
Yeah, for sure.
But I also think it's gonna be a bit wider too, like jack nine off, queen nine off kind of hands too.
Yeah. This seems like a classic spot where small ball, like especially also given that he jammed the ace four suited earlier. Like I think he's not going to be like 100% in tune with the PKO sim. So I think he's going to jam a little bit different over range. Yeah.
Yep, I agree. Fives finds the call, so very well played from both. And sadly, or depends on who you're rooting for. Maybe happily.
Yeah, GG's.
Yep. Okay. Falls to the small blind for folds 10-7 off. Again, this looks a bit too tight to me.
Yeah, this guy is an interesting player. He definitely mixes it up. This seems like a fairly easy feedback to me, but
Next up, okay, we have this hand which was fairly interesting. So king 10 off goes for an open, and ace 10 goes for a flat. It for suited overcall. So I thought this was a fairly interesting preflop. Both the king 10 offsuit open and the ace 10 offsuit call.
yeah.
What do you think about that?
king 10 offsuit open, I guess, could be fine. I mean, it's I don't really hate it. Like it's probably like break even-ish. Ace 10 off is a very interesting spot though. Like I'm not 100% sure how many calls we play versus the short stack open, especially when his bounty's not so big. Like obviously we play calls, but like ace 10 off does not necessarily seem like a great calling hand. Then again, I guess you do block some of his opens, but or dominate some of his opens. But I'm interested. I'm not sure how I would play. I think I wouldn't flat, but see.
Yeah. So what I think is pretty interesting here is hold on, I opened the wrong sim. That is very interesting. Opening the wrong sim is very interesting. Hold on, did I not save it? Interesting. I'm gonna show it later in the video because I'm pretty sure I ran this hand, but for some reason I guess it's not in this folder. Maybe it's not in another one. I will show it in the end. But basically, we get to call a lot as the cutoff here, and I thought that's very interesting. The reason is that the opening range is gonna be very tight. So we don't want to be having that many free bets. So we end up developing a very call-heavy range, especially because we cover everyone behind. And ace-10 was actually a hand that was calling, which I thought was...
The part about calling makes sense to me. I just wasn't sure if ace-10 off would be part of it, but yeah, okay, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so next, king 8 suited, pretty standard open. You folded king 10 offsuit from the bottom, and I think this is a hand I would just call here.
Yeah, I think this is maybe a little bit too much of an autopilot folder, though. I think when he opens so wide, you're in position, you play very deep. I think it's reasonable to call very wide. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. When we're playing like 107 blinds deep, then the risk premium pre-flop and on the flop is fairly low. So I think we just get to call a lot.
Yeah, you're not really gonna go broke very often, I think, especially with this hand type.
8-9 defense, king 8 goes for a large c-bet. I think looks good. Hand selection, flop selection.
Yeah.
8-9 goes for a check raise.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wouldn't really raise with a hand that has that much equity, I think. It's just like I wouldn't be shocked if Coco Jumbo like plays a little bit too much of a like 3-bet or jam flop kind of strategy. So it seems like a big waste to be having to raise fold a hand like this. So I don't think I would take a double gutter. Like a hand like 10-8, for example, seems a lot more reasonable to me.
Yeah, I agree. King 8 suited calls against the clickback, and then on the turn, yeah, it seems like a range bet card for the big blind.
Do you think King 10 is continue here? Like it's obviously you get a very good price, but like this doesn't seem like when you have no direct equity versus what should be a very, very strong knotted range. This just doesn't really seem like a play to me.
I could be wrong. I think when the sizing is so small, you get to call the backdoor straight, backdoor flush draw, overcard kind of hand.
Okay, yeah, it is very
But I could be wrong. There's also the bounty thing that your outs are fairly disguised with King 8 suited. So when you improve, if he indeed has a strong hand, you like just stack him off.
Yeah, but okay, yeah, sure. Yeah,
but I could be wrong, of course. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I would think like a king is usually not even an out versus what his value range should look like. But yeah, okay, I guess you beat ace jack or yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting spot. I guess I would have followed, but
I could be wrong, of course, as well. Ace 9 opens, Jack 10 suited calls. Yeah, sure. I think Jack 10 suited could also 3-bet sometimes, but with the super source stack in the big blind, calling seems preferable.
Yeah, I think you definitely want to try to keep him in. So I would like to call so here.
Yep. Flop goes check check. Seems reasonable. Turn goes check check. And on the river, ace 9 goes for a value bet, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I mean it certainly seems too thin for the sizing. If depending a little bit on like what kind of sizing strategy you want to play here, like I think you could min bet maybe or something very close to that, but this just seems like a little bit too much money going in with a very weak hand. Where imposition's range is still going to contain a lot of strong hands.
Yep, I agree with you. Okay, so next we have this hand over here, where we open and big blind goes for a 3-bet with king queen suited. Already, what do you think about the 3-bet here with king queen suited?
It looks a little bit too wide to me. Like, yeah, I think you want to call it hand, but it can never be terrible. And I also think you probably don't really get forward that often.
Yeah,
So I don't hate it, but my default would be to just call, I think.
yeah, I think so too. Also, I think there is an argument to be made that you are covered by two people. So yes, you will be opening wide of 100 big blinds, but it won't be like super wide where these suited hands can just go for value three bets.
Yeah,
Maybe if
yeah,
your stack and Lexus were reversed, then it would make more sense for him to three bet king queen suited as a covering stack and just go for super linear value range.
yeah,
But I
yeah,
think
I agree.
here my default will be to call. Aces, of course, we go for a four bet.
I think, yeah, I don't really like this sizing. It looks a little bit too big to me. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, this is way too big, I think. But although, I mean, if its range ends up being very fairly linear, so it makes a little bit more sense to go big then. But yeah, I just don't. I think you just have to go a little bit smaller than this.
King queen suited goes for a call. Yeah, I guess you kind of have to call because you're doing really well against the offsuit a6 or suited a6 that you're going to use as bluffs here.
Yeah, but it's not a very exciting spot, especially given the sizing.
For sure not. So, yeah, small sizing bet. And on the flop, I guess King Queen suit just kind of has to fold here, even though it has the backdoors. And
I don't know. I think I would continue, but it's yeah, I don't know.
I
It's
think the
it's
pot is
tough.
getting a bit too large here. That's the problem. Like, there's still some risk premium. Yes, it's a PSKO, but he's still like the top stack against a very big stack.
Yeah, yeah, maybe. I don't know. I think if you peel the format, like this is. I mean, I don't want to say this is the best scenario that you can get, but like it seems like a very decent flop for your hand, and like I think there's just enough scenarios where, like, first of all, I wouldn't, I'm not really gonna play jams in turn, so like you get to realize your equity almost always when you make a draw, for example, and then yeah, it's a quarter pot, and I think first a lot of the ace-x bluffs or even like ace-king type of hands, you get to have a very effective bluff on the river once if they check back turn. So I don't know. I think I would continue, but it's obviously not very exciting.
That's a good point. I will actually write this down and solve it for post flop and share it at the end of the video.
Yeah, sure, would be cool. And I mean, I guess I would assume that King Queen suited is not gonna be part of the GTO preflop range, so I guess you have to make some assumptions there. But yeah, it would be interesting to know.